Before you leave these portals to meet less fortunate mortals, there's just one final message I would give to you. We all have learned reliance on the sacred teachings of science, so I hope through life you never will decline in spite of...
Welcome. My name is Teresa Johansing, and I work as a licensed marriage family therapist. I also work for the Superior Court of California as a mediator and investigator. All my life, I've been on a spiritual practice, sort of a spiritual seeker, and I'm very happy to introduce my friends Connie and Andrew, who are visionary filmmakers and social philosophers. I love their film, In Search of the Future, and now they have a new book that offers a way for humanity to get itself into a higher plane of consciousness. Wow. This book is called The Trust Frequency, 10 Assumptions for a New Paradigm. They describe it as a synthesis of quantum science and indigenous cosmology. Welcome, Connie Baxter Marlowe and Andrew Cameron Bailey.
Hey, Teresa, thank you.
Your book is called The Trust Frequency. That is really an amazing title. So what do you mean by the trust frequency?
The trust frequency is a very high state of consciousness. It's kind of a place, a spiritual place, a place that we can aspire to and a place that we can get to by following the principles we talk about in the book. It's this elevated state of being. It's kind of like heaven on earth. It's kind of like nirvana in the here and now. It's amazing, and I can say that because we've been practicing this for a while, Connie and I have, because you write a book like this and it just compels you to, you just have to, well, you have to put it into practice.
Oh, wow.
And it's a place where the laws are different. This laws that we are living with in this frequency, in this world we're living in, the laws look immutable, but they're only immutable in this frequency. There's a higher frequency where the laws are different. And Henry David Thoreau says, I learned this at least by my experiment when he was at Walden Pond. He's a transcendentalist writer. He said, I learned this at least by my experiment, that when one walks confidently in the direction of his dreams, meaning he walks in trust, he actually acts and walks confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will experience a success unexpected in common hours. You see, this place is someplace we can't even imagine what's there. He will experience a success unexpected in common hours. He will pass a certain boundary, an invisible boundary, and the laws that apply to him will be expanded, or new laws will be made in his favor, and he will live with the license of a higher order of beings. So this was kind of a kingpin in the evolution of this thinking, this quote by Thoreau.
So what I'm also noticing is that sounds amazing, what your quote by Thoreau actually, that if we actually do that.
Well, he was a mystic. He was a transcendentalist, and he was a mystic. He admitted that himself. Mm-hmm. So he saw an expanded reality, and it's this expanded reality that we're talking about.
And he didn't use the term the trust frequency, but that quote from Thoreau perfectly describes what we're talking about. The trust frequency is where the magic lives, and somehow Thoreau was in touch with that.
So it also has the subtitle, 10 Assumptions for a New Paradigm. So what do these 10 assumptions have to do with a new paradigm? What is a new paradigm?
Well, first I think we have to understand everybody seems to be talking about a paradigm shift. We need a new paradigm. So what is a paradigm? I'm not sure everybody really gets it. This complex word, paradigm. What is it? In its simplest form, it is simply a set of assumptions. It's a set of core beliefs around which we base our life. And there are people who say, well, I don't make assumptions. Somebody said, don't make assumptions. Assumptions make an ass out of you and me. But the fact is, we all make assumptions. I wouldn't be sitting on this chair if I couldn't assume that this chair will support my weight. I'm not going to take a breath unless I know or assume that there's air to breathe. So we make these really basic assumptions. And the problem with the assumptions that we're currently operating on in this world, especially with the Western mindset, it's a set of assumptions that came to us, starting with the Greeks, through Newton and Descartes and Darwin, and it's very limited. It has separated mind and matter. It has eliminated consciousness from the picture. So it's become this rationalist material paradigm. And it's based on certain assumptions, such as the universe is a mechanical system of, it's like a big clockwork thing, made of all these parts, and they all obey Newton's laws. Nobody questioned this until Einstein and quantum science, which came in about 1907 and into the 1930s, at which point the whole thing opened up and we started seeing very strange science. I'll talk a little more about that later. We started seeing this weird science where things don't obey the Newtonian rules. It was the beginning of, from science, is the beginning of a brand new paradigm that I truly believe is going to shift everything.
So I heard you say something about nirvana. Were you talking about?
Yeah, well, that's a Buddhist term, which is sort of like a paradise or a heaven on earth. And the current paradigm clearly has nothing much to do with heaven on earth. Heaven is someplace you die and you go there if you're lucky, right? And nirvana is a place you can get to through intense spiritual practice. But the fact is, if we have the right set of assumptions, we can find ourselves in this state.
It's a higher vibration, really. It's a higher
everything
frequency.
to do with
It's a vibratory thing.
with
We all know the good vibes, bad vibes, and we know when we're in love, we feel a certain vibration. When we're in fear, we feel a different vibration.
Yes.
So this frequency thing is related to that vibratory concept. The universe is made up of frequencies and vibrations, and so that's what this concept of the frequency is, and the assumptions determine our frequency.
You know, it's very interesting that you're talking about a higher vibration, because as a mediator, when I have parents coming in to my office, I have a hummingbird that's a picture of a hummingbird, and when they're angry and they're talking about the past and nothing's moving. They're not right here and now. And I always say to them, look at the hummingbird. What does the hummingbird do? It beats at a really high vibration. Is there any way to move your thoughts up to something that's much bigger than all this fighting? So I understand what you're talking about with a higher vibration and a higher frequency. That is really great.
There you go. And in that higher frequency, I would imagine your clients begin to put their attention, and we'll be talking about attention, on, as you say, what is working, on the positive, versus the negative, what is not working. And the minute we change our attention, we elevate our frequency. And the thesis of the book really is that we as humans have the ability to go into our belief system, into our core beliefs, which we took on when we were little children. We didn't choose them, we didn't examine them, we didn't give them any thought whatsoever. They just came to us from our parents, from our ministers, from the movies, from our buddies, from our culture.
And we knew if we were going to fit in and be successful, we'd better play by these rules. And so we took them on and integrated them in for survival's sake. Okay, in order for me to eat and be successful and to be loved, I need to behave a certain way.
Right. And so this has to do with consciousness. This is ideas. This is the mind. This is the realm of the mind, which was sort of lost during the whole Cartesian paradigm. The mind doesn't matter. I love that, the mind does. It's the separation of mind and matter. The mind doesn't matter. Namely, consciousness is of secondary importance, if at all. It's relegated to religion or philosophy or therapy, perhaps. Now, the question we ask is it possible for us as humans to examine our beliefs and to change them? In other words, can I change my mind? Of course I can change my mind. When would I change my mind? When some better information comes along. So a new paradigm in science comes along when some new ideas come and they stand up to experiment. They work. When we have some ideas in society, we change our minds when we have a new idea that works. And so what we're doing here is we're suggesting these 10 assumptions. We're saying we could construct a whole new paradigm out of a bunch of new assumptions. How many? Well, Moses, remember, he had the 10 commandments, so I just said 10 assumptions. Let's just choose arbitrary number 10 assumptions, and let's go with that. So this is how we came up with the 10 assumptions.
And we believe that the mess we're in, the situation on the planet, which is in dire straits, is a natural outcome of erroneous assumptions. We believe that the prevailing assumptions about the nature of the universe are erroneous, that we don't understand how the universe truly works. And so the logical mind gets up in the morning and based on its assumptions, it goes to work, it focuses on the bottom line in order keep one's job. We have wars over scarce resources. We have wars with the other that we feel is our enemy. Well, when we go to a higher level, which we're suggesting and we'll discuss further along, we're one. There's abundance. We don't need to fight. There isn't another to fight with over the few resources. So we think that once we change our assumptions, everything will change.
So how did both of you come to this? What is your background, Andrew? What led you to think about these things?
All right, I started out as a scientist. I used to be a chemistry professor back in South Africa in the 60s. And then I started reading stuff about what was going on in Northern California, right around these parts. And there was this buzzword, cosmic consciousness. That really rang a bell. I said, something in me just resonated. Cosmic consciousness, what's that? Whatever it is, I want to know that. Because from the age of 14 in high school, we were reading these Buddhist texts and all these things. I had a friend who was just a genius level. And so from a very early age, through my friend, Barry, I was introduced to some of this thinking. In my late teens, I sort of tried religion and Christianity and those things. I couldn't get them to make sense. I did a degree in social anthropology, and in the cosmology of the Australian Aborigines, I discovered something that meshed to me perfectly with quantum science. The Aborigines get it. They always got it. They have this holistic quantum philosophy. They don't call it that, but you could look at the way they think, and that applies to the Bushmen of the Kalahari. It probably applies to most indigenous people. So all of this was sort of in my studies. I didn't know what was going on, but I got this call to come to California. The Beach Boys had a song about California girls. I have to confess that that was an influence. And this call that something was going on in consciousness. And if there was a possibility of getting somewhere to a higher state of consciousness, I wanted that. I wanted to know what that was.
And what about your background, Connie? What sort of drove you into this?
Well,
what excited you?
My family, I came from a family of philanthropists from Maine. They were visionary politicians and men who gave away our family fortune to the people of Maine. In the form of mountains and parks and libraries, and I always wondered what they were resonating to, why they weren't hoarding and saving, and so it sent me on this search because I wondered why humanity isn't operating in alignment with their highest self, with the loving beings that we truly are, and I had this sense that there was a missing piece of the paradigm, or missing pieces of the paradigm. There was something in our belief system that wasn't allowing us to get to this place. So I went on a search, and I went to Europe. I took up with an Austrian Olympic champion skier and went to Europe looking for this other way of seeing things, and didn't find it there. All I found was the same old way of thinking, because we come from Europe. And so I came back home and was in Santa Fe, New Mexico in a bookstore, and I picked up a book about Native American cosmology, written from a Native perspective. And all of a sudden I realized that there were 500 Indian nations who resonated to a bigger reality, where the giveaway is a given. You don't hoard, you give away. And just a connection to a more expanded reality, which in fact Henry David Thoreau had this vision and this ability to see it an expanded reality. So that took me on this journey, and once I had that sort of epiphany, visionary Indigenous elders started coming into my life. Visionary Native Americans. I was really American centered, because I'd never been to Africa or any place else, but the Native Americans started coming into my life and bringing amazing information about an expanded reality, their way of life, their way of seeing the world, showed me a truth, and I saw it as a truth. I made that switch from it's a belief system to it's actually the true nature of the universe. And from then on, I spent my life, I have spent my life creating forums for visionary elders to share their understanding of the nature of the universe, because it was my understanding that the next step in the evolution of consciousness for humanity is that we're going to come to understand what the indigenous peoples know about the nature of the universe.
Well, one thing that sort of strikes me now that I think about it in Search of the Future, you say, and this, when did you do this film? How many years ago?
Started shooting in the Kalahari in Africa in 2004.
2004.
It had its premiere of the first cut. There's been 3 cuts of the film. The first cut was in June of 2007 at Harmony Festival in
So what
California.
I'm realizing is, Connie, at least, I recognize that you've been living this passion or purpose, following, opening to a higher frequency yourself. And it's been unfolding for you. And I'm wondering, in terms of your teachers, Andrew, who have your spiritual teachers been?
So yeah, I came over here to Northern California in search of this thing called cosmic consciousness, and I thought that was something that would just happen and you were suddenly elevated. I had this fantasy that you'd suddenly be in this amazing nirvana state. Now I think we're getting somewhere, but back then I came and I found myself at Esalen Institute down in Big Sur. I found myself in Santa Cruz. My first American friend was Ralph Abraham here in Santa Cruz, who's a great mathematician, father of chaos theory, and one of the great spiritual explorers, who introduced me to a gentleman named Ralph Metzner.
I knew Ralph Metzner too. He is a great spiritual teacher.
He is, he's still going
Yeah.
strong. Yeah, he's amazing. So he initiated me in 1970 up on a little deck in Boulder Creek, California, into Agni Yoga.
Ah.
And I started, it sort of, the formal part of it began there. And then there was holotropic breathwork with Stan Groff. There was Sufi practice with Pir Vilayat Khan. And then I got into some really deep stuff with this Persian mystic, Dr. Javad Nurbakhsh, who is the great poet of the 20th century, the great Sufi poet. And then it was Sufi practice for probably about 30 years until finally that gets integrated in whatever way, and here I am. And personally, everything that I've sought all my life, this is the distillation of it. When Connie and I met at the Omega Institute, it was like, wow, she's got an articulation that's extraordinary. I'd spent time with all these amazing people, and this lady said it better than any of them in a way that was more practical, had more, to me, more practical here and now value. It wasn't mystical. It didn't take, wading through complex books. This is very simple stuff. You can get it like that.
Well, I asked the question, what's missing in the paradigm? The answers you get depend on the questions you ask, and I was brought some answers, and they resonated to me, and it's all about love. It's all very positive, so it sure can't hurt anybody to explore and move into this place of trusting one's own heart.
Wow.
And this film brings together people that Andrew and I have known for 20 to 40 years. And it's a companion piece of the book, because it's from this searching and these experiences that we've put together, these 10 assumptions for a new paradigm. And in fact, I have been living this for 20 years. And one has to live this as absolutely true. Because when I made that switch to seeing that this is the true nature of the universe, I changed my life. I mean, and that's what we're saying with this book, that once you take on, one shifts one's assumptions, one's behavior changes. The decisions one makes changes. And my son, at the age of 7, decided that he didn't want to be in school. And because of my association with the Native Americans, who in their essence would never send their children into our school system, and their whole way of bringing up children is that you watch for a child's genius, and then you encourage that genius. You don't put them in a position to be spouting back answers. Well, my son told me that his feelings told him he didn't belong in school. Oh. Well, Obi-Wan Kenobi was my mentor in all this, Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he said, "Trust your feelings, Luke." So I said to Johnny, "Trust your feelings, Johnny." And he said, "Okay, Mother, take my hand. I am going to lead you into the unknown." I cried
7.
his last day in school, and not him. And so this is just an example of how once you have different information, you can make radically different choices with how you live. And one can't even have the word risk in one's vocabulary. You know,
So-
as I said back then, you can't have the word risk in your vocabulary because that's a lower vibration. It's a lower frequency. It's an Achilles heel for walking this walk, because it's just key that one walks in complete trust, just like Thoreau said. And so I just want to emphasize that these 10 assumptions one has to take on absolutely.
So maybe you would like to say something about the 10 assumptions. Could you tell us a little bit more?
First, we will. We'll go into the assumptions. We'll talk about them. Firstly, I'd like to say that this is timely. This book is timely, and it has value. And partly because I think, as we look around the world, there's a lot going on. There's real chaos, apparently. Ervin Laszlo, the great Hungarian scientist, has a book called The Chaos Point. We're at a point in between a collapsing paradigm and the birth of the new. And so these assumptions are, as I said a little earlier, our effort toward moving from a previous very rigid, very materialistic, very rational, reductionist mindset into this new holistic, quantum-based paradigm that's based on some rather radical assumptions compared with what Isaac Newton or Descartes would have been okay with. This is very different. I think my dad or Connie's dad would think we're nuts, and I'm sure we are. But we're expanding this into a completely different vision of what this universe is like. So once we know that, when we move into the new assumptions, it calls for a leap. It calls for the willingness to say, okay, that sounds better than that other old one. I'm going to try it.
And that sounds like exactly what you did with your son Johnny.
Yeah, it
You
is.
took that leap.
Yeah, I did. And we believe that humanity now, this evolving consciousness of humanity is coming, is kind of a frequency collision that people are coming to this on their own. It's bubbling up because it is our true nature. It is the true nature of the universe. And that old belief in humanity of the Darwinian, well, we're just animals and we're naturally greedy and all this stuff isn't human nature. It's just us responding to erroneous assumptions. And that we're coming together now and in the streets with Occupy, a worldwide global rising of consciousness out of this old belief system where the bankers and everybody's still doing competition and bottom line and all that. And so we're seeing this collision, and we believe that what we're bringing with these assumptions is a paradigm that people can actually base their beliefs on and their actions. And the first assumption is that it's a conscious, loving universe, that there's nothing but love. Now, if you take that as absolutely true, it flips everything.
So you're saying that war, and you're saying famine, and you're saying difficulties that happen to us are happening from a loving,
yes, absolutely,
loving universe?
Absolutely, because once you make that as your assumption, it has to be. So then you say, okay, how is war and famine love? Okay? Well, what we've come to understand is that the nature of the love that drives the universe is unconditional. Now, unconditional love, everybody thinks, oh, that's I'm going to love you no matter what. Well, unconditional love from our perspective is that the universe has to give us everything we ask for. Everything. It must. It's its nature. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We get everything we ask for. So, our assumptions, we're saying that our assumptions are our requests. Our consciousness is our request, that we create reality by our consciousness.
Okay, so it's a holographic universe, and we're writing the script and we're writing the movie, and we are the projectors, and what we experience is the projection. We project what unfolds, and we create that through the power of our consciousness, through the power of our thoughts, through what we think, the actions we take, the assumptions we have, determine what unfolds in our lives, which is amazing because it then means that I have to take 100% responsibility for everything that happens. There's never anything, no matter how bad it may look, that isn't exactly perfect for me right here, right now.
Because we're loved. We are so loved by this conscious, loving universe.
It's a very liberating perspective. If nothing else, it frees you from victimhood or frustration. You just accept.
But victimhood the victim is such a accepted position and a powerful position. And this negates that position of victimhood. You have to thank your perpetrators for serving your journey to wholeness. This is one of our definitions of humanity, that humanity came to the planet and gave permission to the loving energies to take this soul on its journey to wholeness. And that the person came with a gift. That's why I could let my son drop out of school, because I knew that he came with a gift and that the loving energies on the planet had to give him everything he needed to become that gift. So we believe that there's 7 attributes of this consciousness that determine our frequency, and one of them is action. So I took this action, Johnny and I took this action and put him into this frequency. And there's several other attributes, which we call the 7 A's.
They all begin with A.
7 attributes.
Would you name them?
Interesting. Starts with awareness.
Okay.
People think if someone is unconscious, they're unaware. So the most basic attribute of consciousness is awareness.
So where you put your awareness, where you put your action.
And then you can choose to put your awareness, which we call attention.
Where you put your attention.
So awareness is kind of passive. I'm aware of you. I choose actively to put my attention on you or a certain situation or circumstance. I focus my attention. This is my consciousness becoming refined. I have assumptions that have a lot to do with my assumptions are ideas. Consciousness and ideas and mind are all interwoven. My assumptions determine my attitude about any particular subject. You know, are the neighbors dangerous? Depends on my assumptions about them. So my assumptions.
And there's alignment. You know, are you aligning with your higher self, your inner promptings? And there's also allowing. Are we allowing this loving universe then, releasing and surrendering and allowing this loving universe to unfold to a place that we can't even imagine? See, we're saying that in the trust frequency is more than we can imagine. And so this allowing is a key aspect. And I really had to do all of this with this decision of my boy's life.
Yes.
You know?
So she took another A. She took a committed action
Yes.
in allowing Johnny to drop out of first grade. I mean, isn't that the most amazing story that she did? And this boy, who everybody thought she had ruined this kid's life. He was, you know, a little girl in the back on his last day said, "But Johnny, how are you going to get a job?" 7, this little girl knew that. I know this boy now. He's 26. He's a graduate of the American Academy of Dramatic Art. He did a 4-year university thing. He's really brilliant. He's an incredibly creative photographer. He's a beautiful writer. He's a good actor. He's got a lot going for him. He sings and plays guitar. I mean, he's a different human being. And I think just to take his creative writing, he's different. He's not conditioned. He didn't go through the program. He's different.
It sounds like you allowed him to follow his heart and his soul.
Yeah, well,
and
my intention as a mother with all of my children was to keep them connected to their spirit. And I felt that I wasn't living inside that body. You know, people say, how can you let a 7-year-old make such a decision? Well, I don't live inside of Johnny Marlowe. I don't know what Johnny Marlowe's destiny path is. He does. And people say, you're kidding. Well, I have a completely different belief in the human, that we didn't come as an empty slate to be imprinted, that we came as brilliant geniuses. And Wallace Black Elk, who was one of my friends, best friends for 15 years, who was a walking phenomenon, Lakota elder, he said, we're born knowing all of this, and we narrow it down to what we can see and hear. So I knew that Johnny Marlowe knew what his destiny path was, and that it was my job to allow it to unfold.
Or his job to exercise his free will.
Yeah.
Even at such a little child, you know, this child had
to me.
will.
At 7 years old,
kids
he
can
knew.
be so willful. And free will it's one of our assumptions. Free will is a fundamental attribute of the universe. Now there's another one of these paradoxes we keep bringing up. Wait a minute, free will, who's free? I mean, freedom?
It is a paradox.
It
sounds
seems
like
to be
it,
a paradox,
yes.
but what's cool is this: each of these pairs of assumptions sort of presents a paradox, and then resolves it.
So the whole thing with circumstance.
The sixth assumption, the 5th is about free will. The 6th is circumstance guides us on our soul's journey to wholeness. Circumstance. So what is circumstance? Are we victims of circumstance, or is circumstance something completely different? What is circumstance?
Circumstance loves us more than we do, because we've been conditioned in this lower frequency with these assumptions that don't honor the human heart, don't honor the human spirit. We go towards this goal so that we can be loved, successful, we can survive, our children will be successful, etc. When we go towards this goal that we think is going to achieve all those things, but when we incarnated, we gave this overarching act of free will to say, loving energies, take me on my journey to wholeness. So we think we want to be a doctor because Daddy was a doctor, and Daddy will love me if I become a doctor, and we don't even think twice about it. But then, all of a sudden, the money disappears. Something happens. You're not going to be a doctor. You flunk out. Whatever. It looks like hell on earth. And all of a sudden, you're on another path. You're on the path that your soul came to be and do. But it doesn't look good, it doesn't feel good, and you know, there are those that walk to the beat of a different drum, just from the get-go. And we wonder about those people, and many end up in institutions, and many end up on the streets or whatever.
So you're saying that those lives are valuable, and it isn't just about fate. It's some divine calling that helps us move forward if we're
absolutely.
Open to it.
If there's only love.
See,
Yes.
tough one to accept. But once you accept that there's nothing but love, nothing happens, nothing manifests in one's life that doesn't come from a higher energy of love with a capital L. You know, it doesn't protect you. It's not a cushy sort of love. It's the love that gives you what you need. It actually gives you what you create.
So we're totally involved in creating this, is what you're saying. And I used to always hear from my teacher, Ralph Metzner, he would say, thought directs energy, thought directs energy. And that is what you're saying also, in terms of your intention and in terms of your attitude and in terms of your alignment and in terms of how you hold love, how you hold spirit, how you hold your life, that spirit is really directing you or holding you, loving you unconditionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can consciously choose to be loving. We can choose our thoughts, we can choose our attitudes. That whole free will thing allows us the freedom to create whatever. The whole universe to me is just one great art project. And we're each here to be manifestations of the beauty of all that is. It's astonishing.
And are there other of your assumptions?
There are indeed. We got up to about 6. So
Yeah.
you know, what would be 7, 8?
Well,
We're not being
we have an
too
assumption
linear
that there's only one.
Ah.
Okay, so that deals with
All
the
of
oneness of
creation is
all
one.
things, of all of creation. And the Native Americans, you know, they have mitakuye oyasin, all my relations, that we're related to everything, and it's much deeper than just a surface thing. You know, we're related because we're humans, and we're related because those animals are in our sphere. No, it's a much deeper connectedness. We are, in fact, all one consciousness. And once we get that, and we're going to, very soon, the veil's going to lift and we're going to get that. Then war will become obsolete. We will lay down the weapons of war and move forward in a higher place because we'll know that we're one.
And the cool thing about quantum science is that is the scientific revelation that has shown us that we're all connected. There's this phenomenon called quantum entanglement that is proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that everything in the universe is completely, intimately, right here and now connected to everything else in the universe. That's amazing. The fact that we appear to be these different forms, separateness has become this terrible thing that separated us as humans. We have these different races and nations and religions, but it's actually an illusion.
And what we see is that this ego self, that is this separate self, is cool, but we're going to come in and into this oneness piece and integrate that and take it to a higher place.
So it seems in this book that you've given us tools. You've raised a lot of assumptions. You've shown how to move forward, and you've given us lots of tools to use to move toward this trust frequency.
Yes, and there's a couple other assumptions. One is that there's only now, this precious present moment, and when we get into the now, that is the gateway. When we forget the past, we forget the future, we forget what we have to do in the future, and we enter the now, and we just act right now, right here, with what is, and that is the gateway to the trust frequency. We also say that we're on an evolutionary upward spiral, that humanity, that we're going to peace on earth and heaven on earth. That's all there is. So those are our assumptions in a nutshell. And we also say that the trust frequency is a place where there's unfathomable abundance. Beauty, joy, balance, our soul's destiny. And, you know, just as Jesus and the fishes, the loaves and the fishes, you know, he brought in, you know, all of this. He was fed these multitudes, 5,000 people or however many he fed with these few loaves and fishes, and had bushel baskets left over. Well, it's our understanding that in this trust frequency is unlimited abundance, which is anathema to the current paradigm, because there isn't unlimited abundance. It is a finite situation here. But we're saying that the laws are different in the higher frequency. So when all of humanity makes this leap, which we believe that when the critical mass is met, that we're going to flip, all of humanity is going to flip when there's a critical mass met. And we're going to raise into this higher frequency, and it's going to be an abundant universe where we all understand our oneness, we operating in our hearts from our higher place, and we transform society. Now, Goethe has a quote that very much mirrors the Henry David Thoreau quote. The moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. But we're saying it's not providence who moves, it's us who move to a higher frequency. And Goethe goes on to say, providence moves too, and all sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. See, this is the same as Thoreau saying, success unexpected in common hours. Goethe says, a whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way. Now, that quote, alongside Thoreau's quote, says it all, as far as the fact that material assistance, chance meetings, something that no man could have dreamt would have come his way. It indicates that we have to release and we have to let it go, move into this commit without the chance of pulling back, and totally walk over this line, and that's where this abundant universe lives. That's where this magic lives that Andrew was talking about.
Yes.
It's the essence of, these two quotes are really the essence of the trust frequency. Once we're in the trust frequency, you walk over that cliff, you know, you do the impossible. You just know that you can do that.
To dream the impossible dream. I figured out what that song is about.
Yes.
To dream the impossible dream. It's not impossible. It's impossible from this frequency, but it's not impossible. All we have to do.
And it's 2012, we actually, humans can dream the impossible dream, which is, you know, we created this world. We can recreate it. We really can. We created this entire, everything that we humans have wrought on this planet. We did. Through the vision we had, the power of our thoughts, we took actions according to our best information at the time. We did what we did. We've learned what we've learned. And now, if we so choose to exercise our will, our free will, we can actually envision a new future. And there have been a whole lot of prophecies around 2012, and here we are, 2012. This is the time of transformation.
Well, I'm also aware of the 60s and where we started with love and all the groups gathering together and the summer of love, and it seems that we have come again around to the same sort of opening to something entirely new.
And it's global. See, now it's global.
Yes.
Then it was California, it was wherever, whatever. But now it's global. It's the Arab Spring, it's the Occupy, it's revolution. It's okay, humanity is not willing to live like this anymore. We don't accept these old assumptions.
It's evolution more than revolution.
Yeah, it's evolution.
Conscious evolution.
Yes, yes. And what you're saying when you were mentioning Goethe, you need to step into it. You need to keep going. And you know, when things happen spontaneously and it appears where people show up in our lives or something just falls into place and it does seem like magic, I think at those times maybe we've been more trusting, just innerly more trusting, and these things happen.
Right, and it takes appreciating that, but it also takes committed action, going where the brave dare not go.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
That's the kicker of this whole thing.
You know that about Johnny.
Affirmations don't cut it. If you don't act it, you don't believe it enough to act it, You don't put your physical body in the frequency, in the place, in that line at the supermarket at the exact moment where that person is going to be behind you, that you're going to strike up a conversation and give you the thing that you never could have imagined. If you'd planned and said, oh, I've got to be at this party and that party and whatever, and you're just trusting and you're taking that action. You didn't go to work that day because some inner voice, you're trusting your inner voice, and you end up in the supermarket when you never would have been in the supermarket, but you're just trusting your inner voice, and there's that person, and then bam, your life changes.
And this happens. This is happening more and more. And I think the importance is to be aware of it and to call it forth more.
And feel gratitude.
Yes.
Not to say, oh, that was chance.
Yes.
What if it hadn't happened? You know, we've got a lot of what ifs that they totally negate the magic, because the magic has been in our lives. We've just negated it and not trusted it. So we're recommending trust your inner knowing, trust your heart, listen, and act on it.
So you're saying that this is what society will look like in this paradigm shift. What can you say more about what society will look like?
Well, what I understand is that spontaneously, trust will replace fear, ease will replace struggle, serenity will replace tension, generosity will replace hoarding, abundance will replace scarcity, unity will replace separation, new systems will develop, new relationships will replace outmoded ways of being, and an understanding of the interconnectedness and sacredness of all things will begin to emerge, and peace will come to prevail on earth.
Wow, so that sounds like nirvana. That sounds like magic. That sounds like the most wonderful world without war. And
so things like war and poverty and all of this, you know, this hierarchy of humans, all of those absurdities that are logical from the rationalist mindset, from this whole old paradigm. They made sense in that world, some sense. They weren't just or equitable, but they made sense according to the rules of that paradigm. This paradigm has completely different rules, and it's based on trust. It's based on harmony. It's based on a good relationship once more with nature. It's based on much more on intuition than we don't throw out our analytical thinking, but we trust our intuition as much as we trust our left brain thinking.
Inspiration.
We
get inspired and we walk from that place. And we're rewarded for it in business, in our jobs. We're trusted. Our employers are generous. We all operate from inspiration. We take the whole thing to a higher place.
So it is like your heart and the mind come together, or intellect and the mind, or science and heart come together, because it sounds like it's both.
So that whole split between science and spirituality, physics and metaphysics, all of those imaginary splits go away, and we live an integrated life. It's you know, all those, you know, the apparent differences between masculine and feminine, all of those this versus that, they just dissolve.
Well, not only that, but it's a synthesis. So it actually creates something new that's never been on the planet before.
That's right. This is not about going back to a previous state. This is moving forward into something that's never been.
And yet, I wonder if it's already happening.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's been happening. That's all that anything has been about for thousands of years.
Yeah.
We're just in this point, this shift, this omega point time.
So this has been wonderful. Thank you both for such a good description of this new paradigm.
Well, you've been living it. It sounds like you've been employing it in your practice, and hopefully this will give you some tools.
It will. And I notice that there are a lot of people that I see, different ages, that are all moving toward this in some way. And it sounds like the shift will come when we all can be
or at
at
least
this place.
or at least a critical mass.
A critical
Yeah,
mass.
Okay.
the shift is well underway. There's even a
Yes.
shift in science that's well underway. All the
Yes.
consequences are not obvious yet. We don't yet know what the assumptions of the next 1,000 years are going to be. All we know is it's going to be an amazingly different world, and it's going to be based on very different principles. And we're not saying that these assumptions are the only assumptions there are. We're merely suggesting, wow, what if the universe looked like this? Because I truly believe it does look like this. So it's my best effort and Connie's best effort to present the way we truly believe the universe to be. And if we truly believe that, well, let's operate from that. Let's upgrade our operating system so we're running on, we're not this old computer bogged down into the previous system that's been falling apart. It's obvious there's a whole system that was and is not working anymore. But we're very much in the midst of a transformation here.
So let's start today and go forward and keep walking
And
toward
stay-
your trust
yeah.
frequency.
Yeah, and trusting your own inner knowing, your own heart, your own spirit, and act accordingly. That's all we can do, and that brings that human together, that mind and heart, spirit, intellect and spirit, ego and divine self together to create this true human that will transform society. We just act from a different set of assumptions. So that's our gift.
And-
This is a wonderful gift.
And know that we can evolve. Like, this is a very
Yes.
new thought. There are people like Barbara Marx Hubbard who are talking about conscious evolution.
Yes.
And the fact that, we've only recently discovered that we evolved. We didn't even know that until fairly recently. And now we know that evolution is a work in process. So we can actually get consciously involved in our own evolution. We have to get involved in our evolution.
Involved.
So in other words, it takes
Ah.
intention.
Aha.
It takes intention. It takes conscious attention and intention and it's very individual. I can only do it for myself. I don't share anyone else's reality. I think we each have a whole universe that's our own exclusive universe. But my universe is mine to make as beautiful as I possibly can. That's my job.
And that's an important point, is that each person has the free will to change his or her frequency. It doesn't matter what anybody else is doing around you. They can have as much struggle, as much poverty, anything they want, they can have. And you can have what you want. So the consensus reality will go on around you, and everybody else's reality they'll do their thing, but all we each have to do with is our own frequency, our own reality, and we have the free will to do that.
So Connie and Andrew, you have just done an amazing job bringing us all these tools to move toward trust and a higher vibration and frequency. And I know everybody's going to want to be able to have the opportunity to learn from what you've created here. So where can people get the trust frequency, 10 Assumptions for a New Paradigm? Where is it available?
It's not available right now. We're in the final stages of editing. We're still polishing. We're working. It's been 5 years. We're still working on getting this book right. So that version you're holding in your hands is an early mock-up. I call it the pre-Oprah version. I'm working in this program called iBooks Author at the moment. It's quite exciting. It's Steve Jobs' last gift to us, really. He wanted to transform the textbook industry. And this isn't a textbook, although it's a textbook.
It is a textbook.
This great school of the
sounds like a
universe that we're
handbook.
on. It's a handbook.
toolbook.
Yeah.
A toolbook.
Toolbook, yeah.
And then there's Amazon, there's Kindle, there's Nook, and eventually there's a hard copy version of the book, an actual book, and there may even be a workbook, because we also do these workshops. So I could see an 8.5 by 11 version of it that's sort of a journaling book that you can use to really, sort of document your thoughts on the subject. So it's not quite ready yet, folks, but it's getting there. I'm working really hard on it. We're working really hard on it. It's close, and by staying in touch with us through the trustfrequency.net, that might be the best way. We're building a blog. Once that blog happens, you can join the conversation. I think this is important material. God willing, it'll go viral at some point, and we'll get this out there. Really get it out there.
Yes. It needs to be out there.
I think it's
It wants to be out
I think
there.
it's
Yes.
there's a change going on as we speak, and this can be a viable contribution to that change, and that would just be the most thrilling thing to do.
Yes.
And we also have insearchofthefuturemovie.com. People can go and experience our movie. And
Yeah, this movie was great.
and we also have theamericanevolution.com. We do a lot of work with Henry David Thoreau and his vision of America and society working from a higher conscience that's in alignment with our founding fathers. So we've got a presence out there, and it'll be shifting and moving forward as the book develops and as people get to understand what it is we're bringing to the party.
Well, thank you both so much. This has been extremely wonderful and such an interesting, just something very important for right now. It just seems so pertinent to what's going on and timely. Yes,
Well,
very
one thing,
much.
there is no time. There's only perfect timing.
Yes.
And trust, you can say, is truly rely upon spirit timing. Fear, false evidence appearing real.
Yes.
So one can look at those acronyms and get some clues and move on from there. So thank you very much, Teresa, for spending some time with us.
Oh, it's
You've been
delightful.
wonderful. Really appreciate. It's really wonderful to have this conversation with someone with your intelligence and your qualifications. So you just you're just drawing from, and this is challenging material really to talk about. The book took close to 5 years to complete, to get it right, even though it's a simple, short book.
Well, we've been taken through a process of cleansing us of fear, because it's cellular. It's so deeply conditioned over so many generations. I mean, forever. Humanity has not walked in total trust yet. That's our challenge. Can we trust?
It's hard to think of a single culture that has really lived this, has walked in trust in the past. Maybe some of the hunter-gatherers in ancient Africa.
It's time for our trust. So thank you very much.
Before you leave these portals to meet less fortunate mortals, there's just one final message I would give to you. We all have learned reliance on the sacred teachings of science, so I hope through life you never will decline, in spite of Philistine defiance, to do what all good scientists do. Experiment, make it your model day and night. Experiment, and it will lead you to the light. The apple on the top of the tree is never too high to achieve. Just take an example from me. Experiment, be curious. Though interfering friends may frown, get furious at each attempt to put you down. If this advice you'll only employ, the future will offer you infinite joy and merriment. Experiment, and you